a little bit later on this afternoon. You're looking at a live pick at the air base in Alaska, where President Donald Trump is preparing for a face-to-face meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is a very historic summit between the two presidents. They will possibly negotiate a ceasefire or an end to the 3.5-year war that we've been seeing playing across in Ukraine. We're sure that Putin and Trump both have things they want to get accomplished during that meeting. We're going to be checking in with Dina Smells from the Chicago Council on Global Affairs to get a little bit more perspective on what's on tap for that historic summit that is taking place a little bit later on this evening, which you can watch right here on Fox 32 Chicago. But also, back here at home, if you've been anywhere around downtown, you've probably heard the zooms going over your head. It is the Air and Water Show making its annual return here to the shores of Lake Michigan. We are joined by Deputy Commissioner for Marketing and Communication, Bria Perdaman. Thanks so much for being here. Let me see if I can. Bria, can you hear me? Okay, all right. Thanks so much for being here. Can you give our viewers an idea of what all is new at the Air and Water Show this year? I think we're having some technical difficulties. Can we pull her up? Are you on mute at all? Doesn't look like Bria's on mute. So we're trying to figure that out. Some of this year's headliners include the returning acts from the U.S. Army parachute team Golden Knights and the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds. Do we think we figured out the mic situation? Bria, talk for me a little bit. Let's see if we can hear you now. No, count to 10 for me.
2, 3.
Oh, there we go. Now we got you. Okay. Now I can hear you. Technical difficulties. It happens in the TV business. Thanks again for being here. All right, we got the Air and Water Show. It's beautiful outside. What do you think makes this show so special for the city of Chicago?
Absolutely. This is one of those cherished traditions. This is the 66th year, so it is certainly going strong. And what's so cool about it is that it's on a gorgeous backdrop with the lakefront and our gorgeous Chicago skyline. It's completely free and open to the public, and it has a wonderful mix of both military and civilian performances.
And give us an idea of this year's headliners. Why were they chosen specifically?
Absolutely. So we tried to show all of our headliners as much love as possible through the years, and we do have some of our fan favorites coming back, which is the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds and the U.S. Army Golden Knights. And this year is really special because this is actually the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, the Marine Corps, and the Navy.
Now, I'm sure, obviously, you're helping put together this beautiful event. Do you have a part of this event that you look forward to seeing every year?
I think all of it is my absolute favorite. But what I love the most is sort of everyone gathering on North Avenue Beach or all along sort of the lakefront and just looking up. That is really cool to see just for a moment, us all gathering and sort of tuning in to the same excellent display of passion and precision. It's really an exciting thing to watch. It's really the audience for me, but our performers are absolutely stellar. I can't choose.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of transformed back into our kid-like when you hear those kind of roaring planes going over your head, no matter where you are in downtown. For people thinking about attending this weekend, do you have any advice on the best way to get there or maybe some of the best views?
Yeah, absolutely. So your core view is going to be at North Avenue Beach, but you have an absolute fantastic view all the way from Oak Street Beach to Fullerton. If you want to be on the water, of course, you can go to a rooftop, you can get on a boat. So there's lots of different vantage points, but the North Avenue Beach is going to be the absolute probably best viewing point. And then in terms of getting there, absolutely recommend either public transportation or ride share for sure.
All right, those are definitely the best ways to get there. It's always a really, really great show. Deputy Commissioner for Marketing and Communications, Bria Perdaman, thanks so much for your time on this Friday.
Thank you for having me. See you at the show.
All right, we will be there for sure, and we will be right back on Chicago Live. All right, time is now 1:08 on this.
To agree to some kind of ceasefire, then it will certainly be historic. But since we don't know what the outcome will be yet, I think it's especially meaningful for Russian President Putin, because this is the first time that he's been in the United States for at least a decade. And for him, it's a sign that he's being validated of there's been years and years of isolation from the West, given sanctions and other types of restrictions because of his invasion of Ukraine. So for him, this is a sign that things are opening up and that he won't be as isolated, at least in terms of the United States relations with Russia for now.
Now, these two presidents have a history that goes back for several years. President Trump has also said on numerous occasions that he thinks that his, relationship with Putin could work in his favor. What role do you think that the relationship that these two have developed over the past will play in the talks that they're going to be having a little bit later on this evening?
Right, yeah, so Trump and Putin have met about 6 times in his first term. So this will be the first time they meet face to face. And yes, they were pretty warm and cordial in his first term. But since then, President Trump has expressed a lot of frustration with President Putin because, in his words, he said that he's been tapping him along, not being super serious about actually an end to the fighting. So that is part of what's going on here. I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, it was just more so, what role do you think that the relationship that they've developed in the past, would that be a help or aid to these talks?
So yes, sorry about that. Yes, their personal relationship is very important, with not just with President Trump and President Putin, but throughout U.S.-Russia relations. The presidential rapport or lack of rapport has been instrumental in moving things along in a positive way in terms of arms control agreements, in terms of the end of the Cold War, with Reagan and Gorbachev being really seriously historic summits. So yes, I do think that does play a big role, and the fact that Trump is able to the fact that Putin and Trump seem to have a positive rapport would help push these discussions along. So yes, it's very important.
And these talks are also happening in Alaska. What do you think is the significance, if any, on choosing that location when these two could have really picked to meet anywhere in the world? Why do you think that they ended up settling on meeting in Alaska with Putin now coming to U.S. soil?
Yes, it's really interesting because Alaska used to be a Russian colony until 1867. And at that point, Russia had lost the Crimean War and needed to replenish its coffers. And so they asked the United States to buy Alaska. And at the time, William Seward was the Secretary of State. And if you've heard the term Seward's folly, he was criticized a lot because paid $7 million about for Alaska, and they saw it as this frozen wasteland, his critics. Of course, now we know that that wasn't a wasteland at all. There's incredible resources and minerals in Alaska. And so it's fitting that not only because we purchased Alaska from Russia, but also that it was on that purchase was on the tail of Russia losing war in Crimea, which of course right now it has also taken over Crimea in 2015, 2014.
Now, we know that there's been this ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine for the last 3.5 years or so. Ukraine is not invited to these talks that are happening a little bit later today. What role do you think they play, and what do you think happens for them, I guess, after these meetings?
Well, to his credit, President Trump talked to President Zelensky, Ukrainian President Zelensky, and some of the European leaders that he has positive relationships with, to kind of strategize what will go into this, what Trump will have in mind when he goes into discussions. He said that he will touch base with President Zelensky and the Europeans after the call. So that would all be a positive. Of course, it's not always clear or certain how President Trump will act when he has these meetings with Putin. So that's a wild card, but in general, at least at this point, at this stage, it seems like the Ukrainians will be brought into it, and at least officially, Zelensky has said he feels comfortable with this phased procession of first talking to Putin and then coming back to Ukraine. For Ukraine, it's the important thing is ceasefire should happen first before any negotiation on especially territorial issues. And then we could move on to more serious discussions, but first there has to be a halt to the fighting.
And over the last 3.5 years of this war, the United States has poured millions and billions of dollars into helping Ukraine's fight against Russia. You're releasing some new polling data tomorrow on how maybe Americans' views of this war has now shifted. Could you share a little bit more insight on that?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, they were released this morning. So if you go to our website, anyone can see the results, but really interesting shifts. So since last March, which was on the tail of Trump meeting Zelensky in the Oval Office, and it didn't go so well, that meeting. But after that fated meeting, we did a survey, and at that point, 52% supported continuing U.S. military support to Ukraine, meaning giving additional arms and weapons. But now that 52 has turned into 62, so a 10% increase overall. But it's especially high among Republicans. Republicans in March, 30% supported providing additional arms to Ukraine. Now that's 51%. That's a 19-point increase. So that is a huge shift. Independents have also increased 51% to now 61%. And Democrats have always been really positive, so they're staying at about 3/4 supportive. So that's one of the shifts. There's also some shifts on increasing economic aid. A large majority of both Republicans and Democrats, about 3/4, also support tightening sanctions against Russia. And importantly, we asked the question two ways. First, we asked, as we always do you support these policy options for Ukraine. But then we also said, well, if Russia decides to decline a peace agreement, would you still support doing these things? And interestingly, we didn't see a difference at all. So whether Putin agrees or not to moving forward on a peace proposal, or at least a ceasefire, Americans do, in the majority, support continuing aid to Ukraine.
It was very interesting yesterday. President Trump held a press conference from the Oval Office where he said he'll know within the first few minutes of meeting Vladimir Putin whether or not this is going to be a good meeting or a bad meeting. What do you think a win looks like for President Trump following this historic summit with Vladimir Putin? What does that look like specifically for President Trump?
I think at this stage, if he could possibly get Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire with no conditions, just a ceasefire. It doesn't have to be for very long. It'd be great if it were for very long, but a ceasefire until he meets with Zelensky or other Ukrainian officials to discuss, and the Europeans and the Americans. They should all be in a agreement on a fair peace. It's going to be hard to come up with compromises, but for Trump to walk away with a win, it would be Russia agreeing to at least stop the fighting for now.
All right, Dina Smells from the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Thanks so much for your perspective on this historical summit between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin that will be happening a little bit later on this evening in Alaska. We will definitely have full coverage for you right here on Fox 32 Chicago. Time is now coming up on 1:20. Got a lot more to go on Chicago Live. We'll be right back.
Okay.
.23 on this Friday afternoon. Welcome back to Chicago Live. I'm Brian Jackson. In our earlier segment, we were giving you maybe a preview of the historical summit that's going to be taking place between President Trump and President Putin. But it's a lot going on in Chicago this weekend. What's up, Kayleen? Need your mic.
Oh,
yeah, got to bring that over for you.
this.
Yes, we got a lot going
Yes.
on. We got the Air and Water Show. We're going to catch up with Lou, who's at Bears training camp. They are having a joint practice against the Buffalo Bills, so they'll be playing on Fox 32 Chicago this Sunday. That game kicks off at 7. Ooh, take a look at this.
How
Practice for the Air
fun.
and Water Show.
That's right.
This looks like one of the older planes.
And it's hard to see,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
kind of hard to see a little bit.
It is.
And it's coming
Look
in
at
for
it.
like
How
one of those
fun.
tricks. Super cool. I just love like hearing them zoom past. Right?
It's so fun. Everybody's
is.
looking up to the sky,
Yeah.
which, you know, you might be curious. What's the weather going to be like for all of these
We're
things?
all
Air and Water
curious.
Show. We also have our first hurricane over the Atlantic. We talked about Aaron yesterday,
Yep.
officially a hurricane
Yeah.
now. And then the football
Sunday.
game. Yes, we've got the forecast for all of it. But first, we're going to
Okay.
pull up, hopefully our weather graphics will be working to talk about the hurricane first.
Oh,
I'll show you the
Hurricane
track.
Aaron.
Yeah, so Aaron, over the next couple of days, we expect this storm to move just north of the Lesser Antilles, and as it strengthens, we could actually see Category 4 hurricane status as we head into early next week. Now, as far as impacts go for the east coast of the United States, we will be watching, of course, in the coming days, but right now it looks like waves could actually be around 9 inches to a foot high. So here's the timeline. You can see again, winds right now are around 75 miles per hour. But as we track it through the weekend, this thing gets strong fairly fast.
Now, is it getting warmer? Is the water getting warmer? Is that why it's picking up speed, or how does that work?
Well, typically when these storms move over land, they could break apart or they run into shear that could also rip these storms apart. But as you can see, it's really following that path north of the islands.
Looks
that I
like
was
it's like just
mentioning.
kind of turning. Yeah.
Yeah, so by Monday morning, 140 mile per hour winds. So we'll be tracking this storm into next week and see the impacts perhaps for the continental U.S. But here's your 3-day forecast for the Air and Water Show. It's going to be hot today. Slightly cooler near the lake, but inland locations, low 90s. Same thing tomorrow. And actually, we have a few rounds of wet weather expected. So tonight into tomorrow, we could have a few gusty thunderstorms. Same thing tomorrow, but many of us miss out on wet weather altogether today and tomorrow. And then on Sunday, more widely scattered showers and storms, actually starting even Saturday night through Sunday. And that's why Sunday's high around 88 because of the clouds and that chance for some rain. And then next week, finally, that's when temperatures are going to be dropping. But really, today, main headline, the heat. Tomorrow, too.
This is what I was going to ask about. You already got the graphic for me.
Oh, yeah. The Bills game, Sunday evening. It's going to be really nice. So, temperature-wise, can you even beat that?
82. That's
Could you ask
perfect.
for a
You know,
better
you usually get
forecast?
like a little wind off the lake too to cool you off just a little bit.
Yeah. And then, the temperature's falling down to the low to mid 70s expected. Now, again, Sunday, we have the chance for widely scattered rain and storms, although I don't expect a washout. Just be aware that we could see some wet weather. So this weekend, if you have plans, if you're coming downtown, know that it is going to be toasty. I know today's hot, tomorrow is going to be much of the same, and then on Sunday, more wet weather. Next week, I teased how temperatures are going to be dropping. So we have the chance for rain Monday. Tuesday is going to hold the best chance for rain and storms because after Tuesday, we drop from the upper 80s Tuesday down to the low 80s Wednesday and Thursday. So drier weather is here by the middle of next week, but we have wet weather before we get there.
So you mentioned possible rain a little bit earlier this weekend. Are we talking heavy storms like we've seen, or maybe just a little drizzle because my yard needs some a little water?
Unfortunately, the SPC, or the Storm Prediction Center's outlook for tonight and tomorrow has us in a marginal risk for severe weather because of the wind.
Okay.
We could see some gusty winds, some friskier storms. So isolated more so tonight and tomorrow. But if you do have a thunderstorm, there's a chance that you could see some gusty winds. Also heavy rains associated with those. Most of it looks like it's going to miss us to the north, which would be great. But there is that potential for a stronger thunderstorm. And then as mentioned on Sunday, we could have more widely scattered wet weather, but maybe less intense.
All right, Caitlin, thanks so much for that look at the forecast. Now we're going to head out to Hallis Hall. The Bears are having a joint practice right now against the Buffalo Bills. Main man, sweet Lou Canellis, was kind enough to step outside of practice to join us. Lou, how are the boys looking so far? Bills, one of the best teams in the NFL. Think we're having a little technical difficulties hearing Lou. As we're trying to work on that a little bit. You look great, though, Lou. You always do. We always love to have you on the show again. Right now, the Bears are having a joint scrimmage against the Buffalo Bills. Looking forward, maybe if we get a little time, we can get Lou back in the show. But for now, time is now 1:28. We'll be right back on Chicago Live. Welcome back. Time's now 1:33 on this Friday edition of Chicago Live. We're going to head back out live to Alaska, where Air Force One has just landed moments ago, obviously carrying our president, Donald Trump, who is getting ready for a very historic summit. Do we know, has President Trump actually left Air Force One, or are we still waiting for him to come out? Do you guys know yet, Jim? Have we seen it yet? We're still waiting for President Trump to make his exit from Air Force One, which just landed in Alaska. The president is getting ready to have these historic talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We're going to hold on this shot for just a little bit to see when President Trump makes his arrival down the steps as he has just landed in Alaska. Let's take a look. And you were just looking at a live shot from Alaska where Air Force One just landed as President Trump makes his landfall in Alaska. He's getting ready for that historic summit.
Which I believe is still the United States.
Yes.
Even
yes.
though he slipped and said, I'm going to Russia. But
He's probably closer to Russia than he is to the rest of the continental United
well,
States.
we remember what former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin said. She can see it from her doorstep or something like that.
And as soon as we see the president exiting Air Force One, we're going to try to bring that back live to you. But while we have you here, Paris, also got some rumblings happening here in Chicago. A new approval rating for Governor Brandon Johnson, and it's not a good one.
Well, and none of the polling has been very good at this point, Brian. Actually, this is better than some of the other polls that have been out there. This said 26%. Now, the thing about it is, who's doing the polling? Is there an opponent financing it? How do they frame the questions? What methodology do they use? But I think, when you look at all of this polling, you get a pretty clear picture that he's deeply unpopular. And I think around this point in her mayoralty, Lori Lightfoot was in the 40s. Emanuel was around the 40s or 50s. So, 26 is tough to recover from. And there's really no demographic group that he's not underwater with.
So that was what I found the most interesting in this polling is, as you mentioned, there aren't any demographic group across the city that support him. So how does he recover from something like this? Because he's about a year away from potentially running for re-election.
I think that we saw a hint of it this week in his press conference where, he spent a long time taking down Trump and really not mincing his words, really going after him. And I think he's setting it up to be, look, maybe you don't like everything I've done, but look at the alternative out there. I'm your bulwark against Trump. Will that resonate? I do think people, independent of Trump, are concerned about taxes in Chicago, crime, although he does have a good record on crime. And we should mention that crime has come down, violent crime, murders, and now that's a nationwide trend. You've also got a new state's attorney, Cook County, and that might have something to do with it. So he's got a good story to tell on that. And then and maybe they should lean into that. Maybe they should look, I've kept the city safe relatively. And there's a story to tell there. But it sounds like he's talking about sort of being the antagonist to Trump, which many Democrats like Gavin Newsom and Governor Pritzker, they kind of already occupied that lane. So it sounds like that's the lane they want to go. Nothing is impossible. And we don't know who his opponents are going to be.
And have you spoke to other people, I guess, in the political circles here in Chicago? How are they reacting to this, I guess, low approval rating for Mayor Johnson?
Well, nobody says that it's going to be a cakewalk for him to be reelected again. And many believe that he is a one-term mayor. But anything is possible. You get into a runoff, and anything can happen. But I think there's disappointment across the spectrum in terms of the way things have gone. These fights, these very public fights with CPS, the firing of Pedro Martinez. And I think the image here that the CTU, which he was an integral part of, is running things. And I think that's something that gives Chicagoans pause because, you have one political group here that has all this power, but what about the taxpayers? Who's representing them? And in Illinois, we're used to very powerful political organizations, Madigan and Burke, having too much power. And so there might be, I do think Chicagoans can walk and chew gum. There might be Chicagoans that don't like Trump, but are also like, but wait, it's like here in Chicago, we've got our own situation.
And across the entire state, Governor J.B. Pritzker was also mentioned in that survey. He was a lot more popular than Johnson. Are you maybe surprised by that?
No, I mean, Pritzker has maintained a favorability around 50. He kind of treads water. It's not great, but it certainly lends itself to him being able to be reelected. And we don't know who the opponent. I mean, we do know a couple of the opponents on the Republican side. And Pritzker has again taken the lead on combating Trump nationally. And so I think that does resonate with voters. And Pritzker and Johnson have not had. They've had a rocky relationship.
They have not seen eye to eye.
They have not seen eye to eye, and they've very publicly said so. And so it doesn't surprise me that Pritzker is is polling better for that reason.
Also, recently happening, the Texas lawmakers that have been setting up shop here in the Chicago area have now said they're going to head back under certain conditions.
Yeah.
What is the likelihood, do you think, of those conditions actually being met by the time they return to Texas?
Well, it's so funny with these Texas Democrats. We don't know specifically. They say we're about to wrap it up, but then they don't say when they're going to go, because I don't think they know. I think they kind of figure this out on a day-to-day basis. But what they did say is they want to see what's happening in California. Governor Newsom, if Newsom goes forward with this, which it does look like he is, then they feel like they've run their leg of the race. They brought it to this point to sort of block what Republicans and Trump are trying to do to gain an advantage in the midterms. And so they might go back home and they'll have another special session likely where eventually those Texas maps will probably be voted on. But they say, look, we did what we came to do. We raised public awareness. Newsom is taking the baton now. That referendum, I don't think, is until November 4th in California. So I don't know that they're going to hold out for another 4 months here and see what happens with the voters in California. But I did talk to some folks in California and looked at some of the polling here. It does look like voters in California approve, a majority of them approve what Newsom is doing. They don't, they want to fight back on what Texas is doing. So
he's saying fight power with power.
Fight fire with fire, fight
yes.
power with power. And it is pretty funny that Newsom is taking, I don't know if you've looked at his Twitter or social media, but his press office is literally kind of mocking Trump when he does his little truths and all caps and quotation marks, and now Newsom has kind of adopted that language, and I have to say it's pretty funny. Whoever's doing the writing on that one, they must have hired a comedy writer. But it seems like Newsom is really trying to go after, kind of mocking the president's style in terms of, kind of these zany tweets
the
that
way
he
you're
puts
like
out.
reaching people.
Yeah. And I think what he's saying about that is like, look, this is not the way I think we should be conducting our business, but it's stunning to me that we have watched Trump for many years communicate in this way on social media, and not more has been made of it. This is somewhat bizarre behavior on some of these tweets, and a lot of name calling and misspelling, and I think that does say something. This is the leader of the free world, and this is a glimpse into his psyche, I think. So Newsom is kind of going after that, but it is interesting to me that you look at some of these truths, and you're like, if the CEO of our company said something like this, how would we react?
How would we feel about that?
This is a bizarre kind of way to behave on social media, but it has worked for him with his base. So I do find it interesting that Newsom is now going after that. But how much mileage do Democrats get at just antagonizing Trump, and I think this is the debate within their party.
Having actual solutions.
Having a forward-thinking vision of like, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to help the working class. Right. We're going to help bring prices down. We're going to help raise wages. We're going to help bring jobs. And I do think some of them are trying to talk about that, but I think they all know that at some point they're going to have more of a message than, all right, well, we're not Trump,
Right. And also, from what we're seeing in Texas with the redistricting, now California, do we think Florida, New York, some of the other large electoral college states are kind of trending that way?
It seems like that. I don't know whether Florida has moved forward. Indiana, remember, a couple weeks ago. I don't know what's happened with that, but the vice president had gone there. I think that, here's the thing about New York and California. They did have more independence in the way they drew their maps in Illinois. Illinois absolutely did not. The Democratic Party drew the maps to favor the Democratic Party here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't know when Governor Pritzker says we're going to go back, and there's not much more they can do. Yeah. Look at, as Stephen Colbert said, it looks like a stingray, that one district, or a stinger on a scorpion. So there's wiggle room with California and New York. And I think that Republicans and Democrats, when it comes down to brass tacks, any serious thinking person on both sides of the aisle knows that gerrymandering is a threat to democratic representation, to a good democracy, to a well-functioning representative government. when you are just having the party choose who its voters are, and what that leads to is just the extremes. That once you win the primary, you're in, because this is not a competitive district anymore. So you've got more polarization, more extremes, nobody working together in the middle. And here's the thing, it scares lawmakers that are in there, because if they are seen compromising, someone's gonna run and primary them on their left or their right. This is a very chaotic way to run a democracy. You know, it doesn't work very well. I think we know. I think anybody on either side of the aisle will say that. I interviewed Don Tracy, a Republican running for Senate in Illinois. He's like, yeah, it's a terrible way to run a government, but right now we're in this kind of arms race with both parties, and it really comes down to, like, nationally, there's going to have to be legislation nationally, because the Supreme Court has, with its rulings on these maps, paved the way for really
the floodgates,
the floodgates for drawing these maps in a way that is not contiguous, is not, you know, when you see a map that's like this and like that and a little tail, you know it's bad. When you see kind of like contiguous like blocks, Iowa is a good example. They had an independent commission, much cleaner, you know, and it's really going to come down to national legislation. But where's the political will to do that? Like, where's the, like you said, if you have more extremes in Congress, then no one's going to want to compromise. So it's coming to a head on that, and I don't know where it's going to go.
We'll be keeping an eye on that. What else do you have coming up on Paris on Politics?
Well, we've done a lot with CPS this week. I think it's so here's the situation with CPS is that the CEO presented her budget to the board, and now 11 board members wrote a letter saying we don't like this. These 11 are the ones aligned with Mayor Johnson and CTU. They don't like the fact that the president is saying we're going to push off this pension payment onto the city, which by law, that is permissible, and that's what's been done. Also, we're not going to take out new borrowing to pay for this. That's the exact same position that Pedro Martinez, the former CEO, had. This is their handpicked CEO. She gets in there and she says, well, she looks at the finance, she's like, I don't think we can do what you want, Mayor Johnson and CTU. We can't take on more borrowing. And there's one interesting point about that. When Brandon Johnson was running, and back in the day, CTU and Brandon Johnson advocated for the city making that pension payment, not CPS. Now the roles are reversed. They're in power. They want CPS to make that. And I think because it helps the mayor's situation with his own city budget. Like, I don't want that on my books. I got enough to deal with. So they flip-flopped on this. You know, campaigning is different than governing. And 11 board members are already saying we're going to reject this budget unless you put the borrowing back in. I don't know where that's going to go.
Saga continues. Paris, thanks so much for your time.
You got it.
All right, time now 1:54. We'll be right back on Chicago Live. Welcome back to Chicago Live. Time now 1:57. A lot going on in Summertime Shy this weekend, including the Air and Water Show. Our good friend Jake Hamilton joins. Jake, you got one of the best seats in the look at that view. Oh my goodness, look at you showing off. Look at this.
Here's what I can tell you is my dog's not happy about it. She's in the apartment. She's hiding out from all the jets and the planes and everything. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to flip us around really fast because I don't want you to miss anything. So
Wow.
we just had, throughout this past hour, and of course now that we're live on the air, I'm sure it's going to be radio silence and absolutely nothing. But I'll give you just kind of a scene setter. You can tell a lot of people are excited for what is the preview day, the practice day. Even though the Chicago Air and Water Show, it's technically a 2-day event. It's Saturday and it's Sunday. We all know that they take to the air starting on Thursday. You could see the Thunderbirds flying through downtown yesterday. Today, it's been a lot of the kind of the stunt planes, the ones that leave the trails in the sky and leave the cool motions. We just saw two of them. While you were talking with Paris, they were kind of flying through the buildings and leaving the circles and everything, but they just took off to fly back to presumably land in Gary, which is where a lot of these planes take off. But you can see a lot of people come out just to check out the practice runs. You can see there's a whole fleet of boats and sailboats, and you can see the tall ship Windy was out there. So a lot of people come out to sort of kind of see what planes are going to be. One of the big giant, I'm going to be honest with you, Brian, I'm not a plane expert, but one of the big giant planes kind of was just flying around in the distance. So I'm not sure what's going on right now. Like I said, in true live television fashion, the moment we go live is the moment all the planes disappear. But yeah, it's a good view to be able to check out. But you know what? If you're anywhere in downtown Chicago, the good view is anywhere you can look up, because you've been here, for forever. There's no bad view for the Chicago Air and Water Show as long as you're in downtown Chicago.
No bad view, and you can hear it as well. Jake, thanks so much for your time. I'm going to have to visit you to watch the Air and Water Show.
Come on, brother,
this
anytime.
weekend. You'll be hanging out with me, you, and Daenerys watching the Air and Water Show. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Chicago Live. We hope you have a great rest of your Friday. Be safe out there, Chicago, and enjoy yourselves. We'll see you next Monday.
Putin doesn't deserve this, Mike, for waging the war on his neighbor, Ukraine, for 3.5 years, that we should not have given him a meeting with the U.S. president on U.S. soil, that this was going to be some type of propaganda victory for Putin and for Russia. Now, Hal Kempfer, who our viewers know very well, has told me either way, it's going to be a propaganda victory, but you go ahead with the summit anyway. Now, it's so interesting for those watching who are, familiar with some of the kind of U.S.-Soviet meetings over the Cold War between the likes of, Carter, Ford, Reagan. Mike, what's so interesting, U.S. presidents used to meet with Soviet leaders, say over the course of a weekend or 3 days in some other location. This is going to be kind of a slapdash, hurried summit. It's just today. And so will they have enough time? But to your point, Mike, will they get another meeting out of this? That's what everyone's watching for. Will they meet again? And if they meet again, could possibly Zelensky be in the room? Going up into the summit this week, that was what we were asking. Will Zelensky be there? Will the Trump administration, bring him out from stage left and say, Putin, Zelensky are in the room? No, that's not going to happen. And so we'll just have to wait and see. But that's part of diplomacy. You get the first meeting, you're at the first meeting, you talk about the second meeting there. So the stairs going up to Putin's plane. Let's watch.
Yeah, we just saw moments ago some of the other Russian officials, probably a little bit of the officials as well as probably the Russian media as well, coming down other steps. And now we are getting this shot that is getting tight at the door where we will see President Putin come down the steps. And soon we will see President Trump there as well. I just want to show this vantage point as well because we have this up here. So I just want to show just what a double box and what a moment in history this is. The summit in Alaska. 2 doors right now where the one door for Russia will be open. Right there, the door for U.S. is open. But at the end of this meeting, will there be an openness on both sides, Andrew, to end this war? We know that the U.S. would want that for Ukraine, but does Russia have it in them today to even maybe not come out fully to say, okay, we are going to end this or even start a ceasefire, but maybe start the conversation to say, you know, we're not going to do the bombing or missile strikes at civilian targets anymore. We are going to just focus on the war and try to wind this down. Can we get there? That will be really something to see here. But what a moment we are seeing in these 2 boxes.
Totally. I mean, to your point, Mike, though, you know, Russia would contend that they don't strike civilian targets. That's what I'm talking about. Are Trump and Putin going to be on the same page? Is Putin coming into this clear-eyed in good faith or not? Or is he going to filibuster and propagandize in front of the president and Wickoff and Rubio? That remains to be seen. And, you know, I think it's so interesting. You see there the red carpet laid out for Russia. So they're really getting the full court press here. The door now open there. It's interesting. The last time Putin has been on U.S. soil, Mike, 10 years. Back in 2015, he met with then President Obama on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The last time he met with the U.S. president was in Geneva in 2021 with Joe Biden. But like I said, he and Trump, Putin and Trump, have been on the phone several times throughout the last several months. They haven't met face-to-face since 2019 at the G20 in Osaka, Japan. And we see someone waiting in the wings there. Not entirely sure if that's Putin. I'll do my best to point out some of the Russian delegation. Obviously, not as familiar with them than with the presidential delegation from the U.S. side, obviously. We do know Secretary of Defense Hegseth will be on hand for this.
And Andrew, it would seem at this point that they're going to try to choreograph it where both of the leaders will come down the steps probably at the same time. We saw Air Force One land about 15, 20 minutes ago, but of course we did not see President Trump come down. It would seem that they would come down maybe at the same time to be greeting right there at the bottom of the steps.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily, frankly, I mean, we don't see Putin that often. So it'll be interesting to see, there's been a lot of theories about his health throughout the course of this war. He's, I think, 70 years old. Trump is 79, so they're not too far apart in age there. But the body language, you and I were talking, Mike, yesterday. Trump is known for his boisterous handshakes. We'll see whether or not that's offered to Putin. And so maybe we'll just have to wait and see what the body composition, the body language, the facial tics, the faces. We're watching it all here on Live Now. So what a double box. That's what we call it. The split screen, Air Force One, the Russian president's plane in Alaska. Alaska, of all places, Mike. We know the Russian history with Alaska.
Yeah, so true. And, this is a time where you have to wonder, too, about this meeting that is going to be coming up and just how hard it is to try to conduct a peace deal moment for the summit where you have a leader like President Putin who really deflects lies and will do it right to your face and with a straight face. He could do it as easy as breathing. And if you remember the buildup to the war in Ukraine, there was moments in January where our intelligence was telling Ukraine it looks like they are getting closer to a war.
Yeah.
And President Putin and his team would constantly say, no, these are just drills. We are just doing operations. But when you saw the satellite images, they were getting closer and closer to the Ukrainian border. And I mean,